Hey everyone, it's Desiree, and today we are going to have some fun with die cuts. Something very versatile when it comes to die cutting. So many techniques can be applied. Here's the card that we're going to make today. Now you can see I have many die cuts here dug into my scraps for my cardstock, and I'm going to be using products from Scrappy Tales. I'm going to be using the Tropical Aloha A7 cover plate, and I'm going to build off of that plate using the Tropical Leaves assorted die set. Yes, you see me playing around with another light set, or the light system from Pear Blossom. These are just so easy to use, and it just adds another element to your card. So in the background, I've taken care of all of the die cutting for our card. I'm now going to create the base. So since we're going to light this up, I've got to have a certain base. I've already taken care of the sentiment cut out. So I've got white cardstock. I cut out the shadow of the sentiment in the center, and then I've die cut the plate using a basic green, like a bright green, but use any color that you have. I'm going to glue that down on top of a piece of vellum. So I've cut the vellum to the same size as this plate. Now this plate is an A7 size, so that means that this is 6 3/4 by, I'm looking here, 4 3/4. And I'm just making sure that that's glued down. I did put this in place first and then set my cloud die or shadow die in the center, knowing that it was going to be centered appropriately. I'm testing out the light mechanism, making sure that it works. I'm getting some double-sided tape onto the back of that so that it is ready. We're actually going to layer some vellum in a moment, and you'll see how that looks. So the piece of cardstock that I have with the cloud die cut out, that is what I'm going to put the mechanism on. Now this will go through cardstock, and what I also should have done to really get more lights is actually put 2 systems in here. So I'm making sure that I'm setting my lights around the sentiment, and you want to be careful when you're moving these because they can come apart where it's gathered, where the light system is. Ask me how I know. And I'm just setting the lights where I want them, and I'm putting down just a small piece of Scotch tape just to hold them down. Now you want to make sure that you keep loops in your wires. You don't want to pinch them. You want to make sure, because that could actually snap the connection. Ask me how I know that. Just saying, these are things that, you know, I've learned. I have this unique hole puncher, and it's a push down one, so I can punch a hole anywhere that I want it if I don't have one that goes too far. It's by Fun Stamper's Journey. I got this a while ago. I don't know if they're still available, but I was able to create my 3 holes, and I'm going to make sure that my lights are sitting right at those openings because that's where I have them positioned. I've placed only a few double-sided foam squares on the back, and I'm going to take my back panel with the fixture on it to this panel here. Now, I could have put the mechanism on the other side because we're going to hide it, but I used a piece of vellum. So that's why I do have it on that back side. And I'm adding some double-sided foam tape around this panel for when I put it onto my other piece of white cardstock that's cut there. I'm not worried too much about the center because of all of the dimension that we're going to have. Now, I should have positioned one of those lights after the A in Aloha, and then it would have been a little bit more even. but I think it lights up just fine. I'm using a piece of blue iridescent mirror cardstock, and I'm putting my double-sided tape around that, and this panel is going to go right on top of that. I'm making sure my layers for the card are set together so that I don't have issues getting it onto my 5x7 card base. Again, using some double-sided tape to get this panel there. I am using a lot just to make sure that it's well secured. It's not a lot of weight, but there's that little mechanism that's going to be towards the top. I don't want that to pull away. And with all of the other pieces of cardstock that we're going to use to build around, I do like double-sided tape for that. And you can also certainly use your liquid adhesive. I do not recommend a tape runner when it comes to something like that. I'm layering up my sentiment. I cut the Aloha out of black cardstock 3 times, and I'm going to place that onto the cloud or the shadow. Trying to get used to saying shadow, but I like cloud. This is also cut from vellum. So there's going to be 2 layers of vellum on top of each other, and I'm just matching it where it's die cut. You'll see that when you light it up, you get this different effect with the 2 layers of vellum. So here are all the die cuts. I chose a bright green because I do already have a base darker green from the frame, but I went with gold and I went with this bright lime green. Again, I dug into my scraps, and that's what's great with die cutting. You can dig into your scraps. You can change the color of your die cuts by adding ink. I showed you that in a previous video. You can layer your die cuts, make them thicker, create chipboard pieces. Again, just with die cuts. You can also cut your die cuts to give them a different shape, and that's what you're going to see here. I made sure that when I glued this frame down to the piece of vellum that I only put glue around the fine edge of this piece. I like to tuck, I like to layer. I think that's the collaging that's coming out in me. You can get some beautiful effects when we do this and add these layers. With this one, I'm not adding any inks to these leaves. By simply layering them, you're getting that dimension, you're getting that definite texture, and it's creating shadows, which again is adding to that depth. So we don't always have to add our inks to our die cuts, and if we have lots of scraps, this is a great project or a type of project that you can use to use them up because we can't get rid of them. They're very useful. I'm just cutting along these other die cuts when I'm layering them, creating that straight edge to go along this panel. Now you could have attached these when this panel was off your card base, but I tend to sometimes bend my cardstock, and I didn't want to do that. What's great with this plate as well, the Tropical Aloha plate, the die cuts from the assorted tropical leaves can match up. So you can create your shadows. You can cut up your dies in different ways and create these leaves to look different. Some I did layer on top of each other. Some I did offset just a little bit to create that shadow. But mainly what I'm doing is just creating these layers, just layering them up between the gold and the light green. I used the gold for some of the centers of the assorted leaves. Again, that's a good way if you have any metallic cardstock to add sparkle, so you don't have to get into, if you don't have those sparkle pens or anything else. This is one way that you can add that. You can see I took that large fan leaf and cut it up to create different elements of that gold to just pop through for this frame. I also used the little florals that were part of this die set. I cut them out of white cardstock, and I'm using a mini blender here. I am adding ink to them, again showing that different way that you can get your colors onto. And I'm using a pink and I'm using a yellow, so mustard seed and kitsch flamingo for the centers. So I just die cut it twice and then have the two different colors available so that I can mix through this frame. Also used the hibiscus that's part of the Aloha frame die, and I cut that from pink and dark purple cardstock from my stash, again from my scraps. And what's great with these dies is she has thought of the little tiny center, and that's actually a separate die. So I used a scrap of yellow to put those into the center. For these, I'm also adding ink just around the edges. It'll help for them to stand up off of all of those green and gold layers that we have in the frame. And then that yellow is just going to be that pop of color through the center. Again, I used the kitsch flamingo for the pink, and then I'm using Villainous, I forget the color that I'm using for these. It was not Villainous Potion. It's a dark blue, and I can't remember the name. I'm so sorry. So a darker color. Black would be fine too on those purples as well. So, don't be afraid to put a different color with a different cardstock to give it that depth and shading onto the ends. It's just like what I say with colored pencils. Get to that scary darkest color, and it can be black. It can be, those deep purples, those navy blues. That'll add a lot. I stamped push on one of the hibiscus, and I have that up in the corner. And now I'm just having fun, just tucking these flowers. Whenever I glue and I'm doing a collage like this, I don't like to put the glue out to the ends. I like to be able to tuck and lift up a little bit and stick something in underneath that and just have that flexibility. I do the same thing when it comes to all of these flowers. The hibiscus, I'm only putting glue into the center because you can see on the right there, I tucked one of those white flowers up underneath the darker purple. And again, just to have those difference. If I had a light where I punched out the hole in that base showing through, I made sure that there was a flower that went in that area so that the light's coming up from underneath all of those elements. You can see it lights up beautifully. Now I'm going to turn out my lights here so my camera may go, no, don't do this. And you can really see it lights up great. And again, probably should have just took that other one to the side of the A and it would have been more even. But I still think it has a great effect. I'm just going to do a trim there that I forgot. And I forgot the one down on the bottom right, but I did take care of that. So I hope I got you just a little bit curious about what you can do with die cuts, how you can build them up, how you can layer, and all the different ways that you can use your die cuts to create your cards or your art, because that is what you are creating. The products that I used will be listed down below in the description. If I've missed something, please let me know in the comments. And if you have any questions, make sure you put that down in the comments as well. If you haven't yet, I'd love for you to subscribe, to make sure you hit that button, hit the thumbs up. And if you want, hit that bell notification, and hopefully YouTube will let you know when the next video is ready for you to watch. Thank you so much for taking the time to stop by to watch the video. I say thank you. I am truly grateful for all of my subscribers and those of you that are not my subscribers that just stopped by. Thank you. Enjoy the process. Have fun creating your art. Try new and different things, but always remember what I say. Always be creative and I'll talk to you all in the next video. Till then, take care.